Allow me to introduce to you this morning Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. Also, we have Farah Maalim with us, who is the deputy leader of the Wiper Party, Governor Muthomi Njuki, who is the governor of Tharaka Nithi, eagerly waiting also for Kabano to join us much later in the course of the program. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning to you.
Right. Of course, a lot has been happening last week, and we know what inundated the news, the deportation of course, NASA Resistance General, that is Miguna Miguna, his handling, which has drawn a lot of flack all over, not only in the country, but all over the world as well, as far as, you know, the law is concerned. But maybe we can just get a snippet of also what Governor Muthomi Njuki said also over the whole saga of, you know, the swearing in and all. Have a listen.
Ili Kenya isichomeke, Uhuru Kenyatta, Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta na Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga waongee, wasikizane, ndio Kenya isichomeke. Ni vizuri kufundisha Wakenya kutii sheria, kwa sababu bila sheria we become a banana republic. Kama sheria ilisema kwamba ile mtu atashinda na kura ndiye atakuwa president, wewe kama umeshindwa unaheshimu. Kama sheria imesema kwamba ni rais mmoja ambaye anaweza apishwa akuwe rais wa Kenya, wacha akuwe ni huyo mmoja. Wewe rudi kwa kiwanja, upange strategy yako, ili ukishinda pia ufanye nini? Uapishwe. Lakini huwezi kuwa unatisha wa Kenya kwa kutumia fujo, vurugo na sarakasi, ndio na sasa wewe upatiwa nafasi ya kuingia ndani ya serikali.
Right, and also we want to draw your attention to what is on the front page of the Standard this morning and the Daily Nation. We gave you that bite also of what the envoys are saying on the front page. This is Raila's fury with US and EU envoys. Leave us alone, he says. NASA leader takes on American and 10 European envoys who insist dialogue with Uhuru must be preceded by recognition of his legitimacy as president, saying they are intruding on Kenya's politics for selfish reasons. This also is tucked away on page 4 and of the Standard this morning. Also, the Daily Nation is carrying on this particular story on the front page of the Daily Nation. Keep off our mess, Raila tells envoys and opposition leader, furious over calls by diplomats to recognize the legitimacy of Uhuru's tenure, insisting he is on the right side of history and cautions the West to take a backseat in Kenya's political journey. This story is tucked on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. Right, we want just to also hear from our panelists this morning, and beginning with Dr. Shem Ochuodho, looking at, of course, what the envoys are saying and what Raila is saying as well. Do you think in any way they're meddling with our politics? If Maalim may just lean back so that I can, yes, thank you.
Debarl, first, we're glad to be back on air. It was very unfortunate that this couldn't happen last week.
Yes.
It was really unnecessary that happened. That be as it may, I don't agree with the former Prime Minister in this regard. You know, Kenya is we've become a globalized village. We're part of a global community of nations. So it's not right that we tell the diplomats that they back off. Of course, I don't expect the diplomats to be at the forefront. The issues of the national conversation, allow me to compliment Governor Njuki. Watching the clip, he said all the right things that some of us would want to hear or say. National conversation is the only way forward. I don't think there's any shortcut to this. But of course, it cannot be the diplomats at the forefront. This has got to be a homegrown solution. But recognizing that there's the partnerships, of course, with the diplomats either on the side or at the back of the Kenyans. So in that regard, I don't agree with the former Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's say from Farah Maalim.
Well, I have a problem when the diplomats come out into the open and say you must do this and transact politics through the media. And I've had my own fair share of diplomats. I've seen it myself in 2008 when we almost became a failed state. Mm-hmm. They will go to this group and then this part of the coalition, tell them to hold tight. They will go to the other. And at the end of the day, it's my firm belief that they all want us to be failed states the way Congo and Somalia and progressively other African countries are also becoming. And other resource-rich countries in the Middle East, like Iraq and Syria and the rest of them, I don't think they care about us. So for Raila to come out into the open and tell them, go hang, go to hell, we are not going to listen to you. You don't have to come and interfere on internal affairs. I'm happy with that particular part of the statement, let me tell you, because if they seriously wanted to make a serious effort and a rapprochement between the two people, they would have gone to this guy, shuttle diplomacy very quietly, and go to the other very quietly and try and bridge the areas where there has to be bridged. And that is the way to do mediation. That's the way to bring about people closer. Not through the media. You go out there and you say, oh, we as envoys say this or say that. It doesn't help. It does not help at all. And the way the acrimony, the way the feelings and the way we are in the country right now, it takes much more than that. And by the way, let me tell you, in 2007, 2008, we succeeded because of Kofi Annan, because of the eminent personalities who came there, Kufuor, everybody who came there, the African heads of state who came to deal with us here. Because I remember what Jendai Fraser told us. And I remember what every a Western diplomat who was there told us that time. I have no faith in them. They will want this country to go the way every other country has gone in third world countries where similar issues have happened. So I think it's time those other eminent personalities take an interest in this and come again and try and bridge these gaps. And because to be fair, when you have about 50% of the nation not being happy, or even 40%, even 30, even 20%,
yes,
that is good, big enough. It's 20% too much. It's 50% too much, and we will not be able to move on. The investors, and right now, the impression I get is that he's going to go for mass action.
For mass action?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So, what does a mass action mean?
Well, mass action means to paralyze the whole country. What will you do?
In what sense?
In the sense that people come and demonstrate and say that we want these reforms.
But we've seen that happening before.
No,
They've come up with the economic sabotage.
No,
it has not made any discernible difference.
Look. At that time, we went so far into it and he pulled back. Let me be honest with you about that. As he himself, Raila, said, no, let's suspend this now. And if it goes on like that, it's constitutional, by the way.
Suspend what?
Suspended the mass action that time. You remember we had mass action throughout in Nairobi and in a number of places, and so many people died, and a lot of
Yeah, then you went full steam ahead also with some of the products boycott, Safaricom and other products.
I don't think he that powerfully prosecuted that boycott. It has not become a narrative that has got to be knocked into the minds and the heads of the supporters of NASA every day. No. There was you could give credit to that. It was a genuine efforts to pull back from the precipice, not go into that too much brinkmanship, and extend this olive branch. No. He was not talking about dialogue. Remember the early days when I talked about dialogue myself?
Yes.
I caught a lot of flack. I was criticized all over. But right now you have a situation in which Kalonzo is pushing for dialogue, David is pushing for dialogue, Betangula, and finally Raila himself is pushing for dialogue. So I think it's only fair that that dialogue itself is given a chance. And that has got to be either homegrown or continent-grown, in my opinion. All right,
you're chairman of the party, is saying he's going full steam ahead with the swearing-in as well. So will that really materialize?
Look, you have to understand. I mean, this is politics. I don't think there's that very powerful genuine desire to go and be sworn in. When you are in the opposition up there, everybody has got to try and talk tough. But the idea is that let's sit down. You better see don't push us to this extreme. Don't push us too hard. We're willing to sit down. Right. We're willing to talk.
But what is talking tough? Because the political tone and tenor of this country is very, very, very fragile right now. When you talk tough, what do you mean you're talking tough? That you make promises that you don't make good of, right?
Look. It's not. People have different styles of doing these things. But to be fair, I think there's a genuine desire on the part of all these other people who feel aggrieved. that there should be dialogue. Now, for us to close the door on for Jubilee, to close the door on dialogue completely and say, you know, you can talk to the fellow who's going to come after me, I think it's to say the least.
Jubilee has not refused to have dialogue, and I think also Governor Muthomi Njuki may allude to that, because they've said we want dialogue, yes, but we have conditions for this particular dialogue. Any electoral reforms will not really broach this subject, but if we have any talks on development,
yes,
then we'll give it a chance.
You see, let me tell you one thing. Nobody is revisiting that election right now and saying, Uhuru, quit your office, Jubilee, quit the office, you won wrongly, we're going to swear our president. Nobody's saying that. People are saying, let's dialogue.
Let's dialogue. Yeah.
And you know, it's fair. It's
okay,
fair.
Let's give Muthomi Njuki a chance, please. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Farah, if you may lean back, please. Yes, sorry.
Good morning. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the sentiments and associate myself with the sentiments made by my colleagues on this particular issue. And my friend Farah Maalim has put it very clearly, you know, tough talk. But, you know, it can be tough, empty talk. You know, that one of wearing a brave face to say we are still there and we will do something if nothing happens. Debarl, what we need in this country at the moment is initiate a healing process, because we are through a very bruising process, which of course has left some wounded and others are happy. And to move together as a country, we need a healing process to be started. And what the envoys have done in this particular case, they have just decided to be the devil's advocate, in that the diplomats are not here just as, they're not businessmen, basically. They are here to take care of their diplomatic ties that are between their country and Kenya, so that we can continue having a relationship that enable trade to thrive and other diplomatic activities that take when we have a cordial diplomatic relationship. Now, you remember a few months ago, the same diplomats were castigated by the Jubilee coalition because of insisting that there has to be a dialogue. I hope you do remember that. And now they're being castigated by NASA or by the leader of NASA because they have said, recognize Uhuru Kenyatta. You see, they read the mood, the times, you know, different, we normally have different environment and circumstances at different times. And they look at what is best for the country at that particular time to be able to prevail peace and have an environment, enabling environment that allows growth to take place. So they have looked at this thing and realized, yes, most of the country has moved on. We still have a percentage that has not moved on. And what do we need to do to heal this process? Then we need first and foremost recognition by the NASA leader that yes, election took place and we have a president in place. What then from there? Can we have a conversation? But what should be the terms of reference for the conversation? Should it be on the election that passed? Should it be on what's the way forward now? How can we be able to ensure that for people we have a peaceful environment even as we go to 2022? Because that is really the point. I am quoted to have said over the weekend that dialogue should be given a place, or rather an opportunity. But that I had my conditions, or what I thought should be the conditions of this conversation take place, because it should not be guided with the notion that they are going to negotiate on how to be able to share power or discuss the election that already happened. Yes. It is just simply about healing process and the Kenya moving forward. And that is what is going to make us really be able to know that we do not have those unpredictable foreseen that Maalim is talking about mass action. Because Debarl, even in the worst of the scenarios, even in war, you must know when to retreat, you must know when to quit, so that you can strategize and fight another day. You cannot keep on fighting through and through, even when you've hit a blank wall. You can have a tactical retreat and plan for another time. And since this is politics, and it's not cast on stone, my appeal to NASA coalition and also to Jubilee coalition is to give that dialogue a chance guided by the fact that we are not going to discuss the election, we are not going to discuss power sharing. It's how to heal the country and be able to wait for 2022.
All right. Yeah, briefly, can we take a short break? Then we'll circle back with you, Dr. Shem Ochuodho, kindly. Right, we have to take a short break right now. So when we circle back, we continue with the conversation. Remember, you can head over to our Twitter handle as well, where you can chime in, share your contributions, ask questions as well, and we shall forward that to our panelists who are seated with us this morning. Also, our Facebook profile name is MLiveNTV 20505 is our SMS portal. Coming up on the other side of the break, don't go away. NASA leader Raila Odinga has told off foreign envoys led by U.S. Ambassador Robert Godek following remarks they made urging Odinga to accept Uhuru Kenyatta as the president of Kenya. A few weeks after they were taken captive in Akobo, South Sudan, two Kenyan pilots, Frank Njoroge and his co-pilot Kennedy Shamala, can't still leave South Sudan. The family of the two say talks to have them released have stalled. And South Africa's African National Congress ANC leader Cyril Ramaphosa has said the party's executive body will meet today to finalize discussions on the future of President Jacob Zuma, who is under mounting pressure to step down. Welcome back. You're watching This Is a Point. We continue with our conversation here with our panelist, Farah Maalim, who is the Deputy Leader of Wiper Party, also former Deputy Speaker of the 10th Parliament. Also do have with us Governor Muthomi Njuki, who is the Governor of Tharaka Nithi, and Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is the Global Leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We promise to circle back with his comments as well. Dr. Shem Ochuodho, before we took a short break.
Debarl, in as much as it's true that there are instances when foreign governments have worked against the interest of host countries and even interfered in terms of putting in or getting out leaders. I think in this particular instance, there seems to be a congruence in terms of the interest of, say, the UK, the Americans. Obviously, they have business interests. But their interest in this case, in my opinion, concurs with the Kenyan interests. What are the Kenyan interests? We want, of course, a thriving economy. We do know that the economy is suffering heavily. There are investors that are not coming in. There are people who have said, no, we're watching first. We want to see if things stabilize, then that's when we'll come. So clearly, there is a problem. Yes. This is the only one thing I may not agree with my brother, Governor Njuki, when he says most of the country has moved on. I don't think so. The truth is about half of the country has moved on, the other half hasn't. But the point is that Kenya remains a sleeping giant. You know, if we just want to keep doing what we have done the past 60 years, then it's okay, we can move on. But Kenya could be able to do much bigger. In fact, when Excellency the President talks about the big four, and I quite wish to associate with those big four. Those are issues that would make this country tick. But the big four cannot work in the situation where we are now, when half the country is not participating. So let's not deceive ourselves in that regard. But having said that, I think it's important and it's only fair that we unbundle what is it that the diplomats say it. Kenya Diaspora Alliance itself, later last week, issued a statement more or less saying the same things. Because what are they saying? They're saying we don't want extra constitutional matters. When somebody purports to have been sworn or to be sworn, you know, as a people's president, that's not provided for in the Kenyan law. It's not anywhere in the constitution. When somebody decides to switch off media houses, the constitution protects the freedom of the media and the freedom of information. So that's something that's extrajudicial and extra constitutional. That's what they're saying. When somebody decides to deport Miguna, you know, without due process, he's a dual citizen. And in this regard, let me talk like somebody who, together with Honorable Mohamed Shidie, co-sponsored the first motion in Parliament ever, in the year October 2001.
Maybe for the benefit of our viewers who they don't know who Mohamed Shidie is, please.
It was MP
for Lagdera.
Lagdera.
Please, yes.
And so when we sponsored that motion, dual citizenship, KANU and NDP then called New KANU conspired to shoot it down. But it initiated a process, and KDA and other diaspora bodies kept the pressure on. We were glad that in the year 2010, dual citizenship was given. But in this particular case, when somebody decides, without following due process, to send back somebody we think is a Kenyan, I'm hoping that at some point we could delve into that in a little more detail.
Yes.
But for now, the point is what the diplomats are saying, that whatever we are doing, let's do it within the law. And also saying that, look, there was a due process. We had elections in August last year with a repeat one in October, which for some reason NASA decided to stay away from. I don't think if NASA was honest, they would admit that they made a mistake. But having made that mistake, if Jubilee was ultimately declared a winner and they didn't contest it again in court, President Uhuru is the legitimately elected president of the republic. So basically what the ambassadors are saying, in my view, they're basically saying the right thing. But finally, they're also saying, look, this is not to say there's no problem. Kenya, there is a problem. There is a stalemate. We cannot move on. Soon there's going to be paralysis. So it's vital that we have a national conversation. So in sum, I think the ambassadors said the right things. I'm not agreeing with them just because they're foreigners, even though we do know by definition of diaspora, we include foreigners in Kenya. So the ambassadors are also part of the diaspora. But I think what they're saying is right, is good for this country, and we need it. And that national conversation, I cringe when I hear some leaders say, no, we don't need this dialogue. We badly need the dialogue like yesterday. And for me, being part of the Tushauriane wa Kenya, it's unfortunate some more of my colleagues were expecting are not here with us. But the premise is that we need to bring back this country together. We need to, how do we recreate the year 2002? In the year 2022. You remember, we all know what happened in the year 2002. There was so much enthusiasm. You know, I felt proud. Kenyans were voted to have been the most optimistic people. How can we bring back the country together? My appeal to my brothers here, I think today we have so much on the left, so much on the right. The middle ground is thin, and by middle ground, I'm not just talking of people who are neutral. We can't be neutral. But I'm talking about people who are objective, who are non-partisan. If we can grow that middle ground, then perhaps moving forward, 2022, we may have again a united Kenya, which we need.
All right, and of course you released a press release, I think last week, where you're saying that Kenya Diaspora Alliance calls for accelerated national conversation and healing. Right. And where is this conversation actually taking place with the Tushauriane? Because we've also been very mealy-mouthed about it. Are you coming out to the fore as well? We can see it here. The Kenya Diaspora Alliance, a member of a national conversation multi-sectoral forum, Tushauriane wa Kenya, call for accelerated and deepened engagement and hastened hosting of the Kenya We Want 3 National Convention before media. In the meantime, we call for utmost restraint by all key stakeholders, especially leaders of Jubilee and NASA and their supporters.
Debarl, in one session, we were with patriots like Mama Muthomi Njuki, yes. Mama Fibiasia and so on. Muthomi told us, look, we're talking of the Kenya we want. We have had Kenya we want conventions before, 2 of them. One, I understand, in 1957, before some of us were born. And another one, I think, when President Kibaki came to power. That was the Kenya we want 2. What happened? What became of them? What were agreed that we're now talking about the Kenya we want? I think the premise is a lot's happened in the background. I think even last week, the National Council of Elders met in Nairobi. I understand 3 elders from each of the 47 counties, from every breadth and corner of this country. Last week, there were elders from different communities that met in Kisumu during the burial of the Archbishop Silas Owiti. Next week, there will be another meeting of a number of opinion leaders and elders in Kericho. So some of these conversations are going on behind the scenes. But I think when we talk of accelerating, perhaps it's time that these discussions that are taking place, and 20 different, for Tushauriane, there are 20 different sectors that have been identified as important, maybe beginning with politicians, those both in power and outside power, academics, professionals, and so on, different sectors.
Thank you.
It's vital that all these sectors get to meet to come out. So for me, even though people are talking, the only area where I may not totally agree with the diplomats when they talk of the president and former prime minister talking.
Thank you.
That's important, but the problem is not just between President Uhuru and Prime Minister Raila. It's a national issue that we need to be addressed cross-border.
Right, let's hear from Farah Maalim, first of all. at what length should we have the diplomats and the envoys really, maybe somewhat really meddling, so to speak, or being engaged in our politics? Because it seems when we have ticklish issues, like right now where we have a contentious or maybe the swearing in that they have not really acknowledged, then that's an issue. So we have also Raila Odinga taking special umbrage with the envoy as well as far as this is concerned. So when we have diplomats in this country, we're not living in an island. We need their input as well, because always we run to them for aid, we run to them for advice. So when, or what sort of yardstick should we use for them to measure, for them to be involved in our politics?
One of the very cardinal principles of diplomacy is what you call non-interference in the internal affairs of a country. But having said that, that non-interference is a presumption of somebody trying to either support one person against the other or play the domestic politics. That is what they're not allowed to do. But to be able to step aside and give some valuable advice at a time like this is acceptable. But there is a way to do that. There's a way to do that. And it's been done many times in the past. And those ways are usually, you know, for example, if they seriously think this one needs the attention of somebody like the head of state or their own secretary for state, they can come, the secretary for state can come here and sit down with these luminaries in the opposition right now in NASA and talk to them. It's happened before. Or maybe invite one or two of them and let them be addressed also by equally very high ranking officers in their own. And the idea is to maintain that shuttle, very silent, very secretive, what you call diplomacy, until you're able to get something substantive, tangible. Then you can come out into the open and say, this is what we want Kenya to do, and we are in agreement on these things, and then you proceed on now to carry the country with it. But for you to get involved and say so-and-so must do A, B, C, D, or so-and-so must do A, no, it's not right. When you have not even brought the different, what do you call, parties, any clause, it is not fair. It's actually hardening it further. Look at the way, say, Raila's fury with US and EU envoys. It's a serious fury. And before that, there was also a serious fury from the Jubilees side when they went to the EU Parliament and gave a very scathing, you know, reporting on the way the elections were conducted in this place, effectively saying that it is illegitimate. There's no legitimacy. Now then they turn around and give a completely opposite or contradictory statement on that. What is your idea? You embolden this side, and then you go and embolden the other side, and the idea is that each one of them should hold tight. I've seen it. We've been through this before. We don't like it. There's no genuine, honest, you know, integrity on their part, and as far as trying to create a rapprochement between the two different camps in the country.
All right, but the question will be that NASA also is seeking, or it plans to shift the fight against Kenyatta's re-election to the United Nations. We had a statement from Guterres himself, really acknowledging the legitimacy of Uhuru Kenyatta itself. So are they not really fully aware that the United Nations is on the side of, you know, the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta?
You see, they're not even talking about legitimacy. It's a fait accompli in a sense, you know.
Who are not really talking about legitimacy?
All of them. I mean, when it comes to legitimacy, and there's a difference between legality and legitimacy. They should emphasize more on legality. Legitimacy is very contentious because a whole section of the country is saying that Uhuru, yes, is the legal president in the country, but he's not the legitimate president in the country because there is an assumption. One, of course, the whole part of the country, or his main opponent, boycotted those elections, and the turnout was very low. But that's not to say that there's no legality in that. The legality is there.
No. But they say here that that is his sentiments were in response to a statement by 11 ambassadors, that is Raila Odinga, and high commissioners, among them U.S. Robert Godek, UK's Nick Haley, and Canada's Sarah Hardeki, who urged him to accept and the fact that, to accept the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto were the legitimate president and the deputy of Kenya after the Supreme Court upheld the election on October 26 last year. This flies in the face of what you're saying that...
No, it's not what I'm saying. I mean, that's the
saying?
national narrative. And NASA is saying that you might be legally there, but you have no legitimacy. You get my point? So don't, in negotiations, when you do a conflict resolution, you're trying to resolve a conflict, you go in for the areas, you seek the commonality, you seek the common areas. You don't go straight away into the contentious thing. When you're trying to talk to the Israelis and the Jews, to try and bring them together, you don't start with Jerusalem, and whether it's going to be the capital of Israel or Palestine.
Yes.
You go to all the other areas. You go to the issue of refugees, you go to the issue of the two states, what do you call it? You go to a number of areas where they have both in common, have an agreement in that.
Thank you.
So for them to go straight into legitimacy, they don't want these things, that approach might take place. Because I'll tell you, why did they not talk about, why was it that in the EU Parliament they bombarded and blasted the way the elections were conducted and literally came to the conclusion that it might be legal but not legitimate? How can they talk from both sides of their mouth at the same time?
All right, we'll look at the report. I think we have it somewhere. We'll actually look at it. Let's hear from Muthomi Njuki briefly on this before we move on.
Yes, Debarl, I am just wondering, how do you measure legitimacy? There has to be a parameter. And in this particular case, we use the law. What does the law say? The law says if a due process was followed and we have a due elected president, that becomes the president and the government becomes legitimate. So when we say that it's not legitimate, I don't know what parameter or what units is Farah Maalim using.
Can I ask,
I'm saying this because
what's the difference between legitimacy and legality? Right now you're trying to give
the government we have in place is both legitimate and legal because we use legal parameters, which is the law. Debarl, it is not possible for, after an outcome of every election, in any part of the world, for all the parties to be happy. Even when they shake hands and say, I wish you the best, it is usually just being courteous. We saw America where the losing candidates had the popular vote, but of course we had the issue of the American system where it is normally a different council that decides who takes the seat. And we saw demonstrations for 2 days in America where the voters were saying, I do not recognize Trump to be our president. But look at America today. They have settled down, they have gone back to their business, and as much as they don't like Trump, or most of them, because that is really the reality, they have given him space to work, and they are waiting for 4 years to be over so they can go back and have their say. In Kenya, as much as we want to look at it as if most of the Kenya is politically involved in all this ulabalu that is the business of the politicians, the common mwananchi in the village, even in those places where we say they have not moved on, they have moved on. Talk to the person who does business of selling fish in the village and these are the things, and they tell you, we have moved on, we do not want this thing, we want to have a country where things are functional. So it is good to say that it is the politicians who are dissatisfied with the fact that they lost in this particular election. And that is where we are saying, if we have to have a conversation, let them have a conversation of really, so that we do not keep on refueling over and over again. What value does it add? In the issue of deportation, and I want to say on this,
we'll come to deportation, right? We'll come to it as a subject.
I want to tie it with this.
Can we just do it separately? Okay. Yeah, let's just go sequentially. Let's hear from Dr. Shem Ochuodho.
Yeah, Debarl, I think the issue of legitimacy and legality here, you recall during the KANU days, Moi used to rule with 30% of the vote. Actually, sometimes 23%, 27%, because the rest of the opposition was split. One would question, was that legitimate? Well, as far as we're concerned, it was both legal and legitimate. It's a thin line, but I think we need to recognize the point that in the US, even though the Electoral College would allow President Trump to accede to the instruments of power,
Yes.
even though Hillary Clinton had majority popular vote. But the situation in the US perhaps is different from ours. You know, we're still a young, growing democracy that's developing. You know, if anything, you know, the poverty level in this country is massive. And I wanted to, in a way, rectify a bit what Governor is saying here, that even in places which were considered largely NASA, people have since moved on. In fact, I could tell him the reverse. I was talking to a friend, a leading captain of industry, who was being addressed by a very senior Gema leader, very senior, telling him, look, contrary to the perception the country has, that, you know, as the Kikuyus, the Gema, we are the ones who are feeling good, you know, but in reality, it's only a few of us, the elite who are in power, who are feeling good. What are we leaving back to you, our children, as professionals, and our grandchildren? The rest of Kenya will think, you know, these are the guys who have for 20, 30, or whatever years been the ones in power and feeling good. The premise that was coming out, look, we must have a conversation. And the sooner we start having this conversation amongst ourselves as Kenyans, the better. So I wanted to underscore that fact that, well, in the US, there are institutions that work, and they can take a shock. They can make do with a presidency and administration that's not so good for 4 years. But Kenya doesn't have that luxury, because we really need to be moving on.
We really need to be moving on. But the question is, of course, you've mentioned of the Kenya we want one and Kenya we want two. We want now Kenya three. The Kenya we want three.
Sure.
So, but what are some of the hallmarks and some of the resolutions that we had from this 1 and 2 that they haven't been effected today, that maybe they're not really working?
I think the Kenya we want 2. I'm not conversant with the Kenya we want 1. But the Kenya we want 2.
But if you're not conversant with the Kenya we want 1, how are you coming to Kenya we want 3 and you don't have a history which bears you down to some of the resolution that you'll build on Kenya we want 3?
Actually, as to Shauriane, we have some of our researchers trying to dig up what exactly became of the Kenya we want 1. But at least the Kenya we want 2, we know the conversation, the President Kibaki's leadership and the premiership of Raila Odinga. Eventually, we came up with a constitution. So there were some successes that came out of the Kenya we want 2. If we can build upon that, what we have is not perfect. The constitution we have is not perfect, but is reputed to be one of the best in the world. How can we build upon that? For me, where we are missing out is the economic side. I was happy that at last Kenya came up with Vision 2030. All along, we've never had a long-term vision. You know, it's like we were totally tagging in darkness. You know, we used to have the 5-year plans, which often are just kept in shelves, not followed. But at least the Kibaki government gave us a long-term vision, which somehow I must also say, although Jubilee talks about it, to what extent we are following it, I'm not too sure. I can say that for me, as diaspora, we're glad that remittances is one of the very things that has attained Vision 2030, even in the year 2017, and even 2018. Why do I say that? Vision 2030 anticipated would be having a 2-digit growth, annual growth. It's only remittances which has been every year of the past 10 years been growing with a steep over 10% growth. But what do we need to do for the economy to grow with a 2-digit growth? We've seen reports of Ethiopia being very soon the biggest economy in this region, while we are busy in talking about these other things.
Thank you, Shem. Thank you. Let's hear from Farah Maalim.
Yes. To begin with, the early days, we had what we call the fast passport system. The fast passport system is any person who has a simple majority. And we still use that one in the parliamentary and the MCAs and all these other, the governors, sorry, the governors, the senators. The only one now we use majoritarian is the one of the presidential. If you have 10 candidates for a seat and you have 150,000 registered voters, but the one who has the simple majority has 11,000, that guy is going to be announced as MP for that area or the MCA, or even if it is in the case of the governor. So at no time did, by the way, Moi get anything less than 37%. The list he got was in 1992, and he had 37%, because there were too many. He had 1.8 million votes, Matiba had 1.4, I remember Kibaki had 1 million, and the late Jaramogi also had about 900,000. Now the other point, because it was a system, clearly that one has no legitimacy or legality in that. Legitimacy, the word legitimacy comes from, it's actually in law also, the way a child is born. Illegitimate or illegitimate. When a child is born out of wedlock, it's illegitimate. That's how it used to be before, and there used to be differentials even in how much he can enjoy or she can enjoy the benefits of being the child of that person in terms of inheritance and the rest. Of course, that has changed now. Now, what basically it means, you will still have a child, but that child is the process in which it was conceived and delivered is different from the process of the legitimate child. So the way we are now, when you have 50% of the population boycotting the elections and not voting, then clearly you cannot talk about legitimacy for such things. You know, it's good sometimes to be very categorical about some of these things. So the issue of legitimacy, we don't have that legitimacy. The same way you can have a child, it's nonetheless a child, whether you have it out of the wedlock or you have it through wedlock. I mean, right now the things are all, but that's where the origin of this word is. It's not the percentage that you have achieved. But the point I'm trying.
But the process is the same.
Well, the process, of course.
You can't say the process is different. The process is the same, maybe under the confines and circumstances which are.
The process is different in that one of them there's a pastor or a father, there's a sheikh, a qadi, and
okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah,
so in a sense,
all right.
In a sense, that bit,
okay,
that bit is what we still have. But now let me come to it here. We need to get that right. The country has to move on.
Thank you. The country has to move on. Just a moment. No. I want to take on Farah Maalim, because you mentioned the European report and the way the European Parliament also met and said that you know, they were actually flying in the face of what we are seeing right now, because they said the elections were not legitimate. Just a moment. We have the report here. Maybe you can just show us also, our director, the final report, Republic of Kenya general elections 2017, and they raised some of these the key conclusions of the EU European Observation Mission Kenya 2017, and tucked away there, I think, from maybe 9. Right? If you may see that, they say that the judiciary was subject to increasing pressure. It was extremely concerning that the day before the fresh presidential election, a case seeking postponement of the polling could not be heard by the Supreme Court due to a lack of quorum. This deepened concerns of political intimidation of the judiciary. But it says, the fresh presidential election in October was generally well conducted. This is what now the report says. With full results data and forms made available promptly. Following NASA's boycott, there was a severely reduced turnout and a landslide victory for Jubilee. 11, it says, just a moment, and then it says the key civil society organization and networks were subject to intimidating state actions just before each of the 2 deadlines of lodging presidential petitions. And the media provided increasing scrutiny of the process, but could not always report freely, and attempts were made to restrict live coverage of disturbances. There is nowhere. From this report, I've gone through it. There's nowhere where it's mentioned.
You're looking for the word legitimacy, but you see the word legitimacy is exactly what you have mentioned right now. When you have all those institutions not working in a free and fair, what do you call, environment, when you have a Supreme Court that cannot sit, where have you ever heard of a situation in which a Supreme Court is not sitting?
Debarl,
they cannot get a quorum. Just a moment, let me just finish. Cannot get a quorum, you know.
But was that pegged to now the whole, the government?
Of course.
That was a dysfunction of the judiciary itself.
No.
He came to the fore and admitted, right?
It is not a dysfunction. There was intimidation. I mean, it's all there. You see, the sad thing about this country is that you see a white... Just a moment. You see a white, what you call, board here, and you want to convince everybody it is black. Or you see it black and you want to convince everybody it's white. The pressures were there. There's nothing. Just a moment.
It seems the two
okay,
just
a moment. Just let him finish. Just let him finish, please. Governor Farah, you
see, all those gaps that you mentioned in here, you must get them right for this thing to be totally legitimate. You can't get them right when you don't have that. When you have 50% of the population boycotting the election, what's wrong with you? Is this ever sinking into your minds?
Okay.
I think...
we'll come to you. Governor Muthomi.
Right there, Debarl, you remember the word Farah Maalim used about talking tough. He's still continuing doing the same thing, talking tough, but due to lack of a better word, but still empty, because this is misrepresentation of facts. I will tell you why I'm saying this. Look at what Farah is repeatedly talking about, 50% boycott. And then he goes ahead and says intimidation of the judiciary. but he does not see the intimidation of voters in the second election that may have caused a lack of quorum in terms of the voter turnout. Because in places where we had violence, we had people who, we had 50-50 in terms of what we call political stronghold. Then there are those who were intimidated not to go and vote. And that is why we had that kind of a voter turnout. And therefore, you cannot confidently say that we had a 50% voter turnout, and therefore the rest of the country did not want to participate in the elections. All right. When it comes to systems, I have not seen anywhere in this world where we have system, however efficient it is, that it's 100% efficient. Mm-hmm. So things like maybe one judge did not turn up, we had a case that was late, we had maybe a threshold that was not reached. We have to have something.
A bench
50%.
A bench of 7 and only 2 turn up?
Yes. We have to have something, 50%, 60%. There has to be something. No. We cannot base everything on and say that now because we don't have 100% efficient system, we go back to zero. Okay. It is not possible.
All right, but what would you say? Just because also I want maybe also to come on the side of Farah Maalim, where key civil society organizations and networks were subjected or were subject to intimidating state actions just before each of the 2 deadlines for lodging presidential petitions. Right? What would you say? Was that also a conducive environment for a free, fair, and credible election? Muthomi Njuki, just a moment. Muthomi Njuki.
Sorry?
All right, let's go to Shem Ochuodho.
Yeah, no, I think the issue of the clampdown on civil societies, and I think we've said it, we probably would just repeat it. For me, anything that's outside the law is not right. And that includes the clampdown on the civil societies.
That is what I'm asking Muthomi Njuki.
Was it to the extent that was large enough to affect the outcome of the elections? That I'm not too sure about. But having said that, you know, when we talk of electoral justice or injustice, there are so many things we need to talk about. But allow me to talk about this point that Farah has repeated of 50 majority or half the country or 50% boycotting the elections. Coming from the community I feel very pained because they talk tough on these screens. How many of these voters, was there any voting in this country?
No.
Was there none at all? I don't think so, because it was reported some, very little, but some. But in places where I come from, this is ultimately left to be an ODM Luo problem. Now, this is the problem I have, because as my community, in as much as Kenyans feel 41 against 1 against the Kikuyu community, there are also those who are already beginning to feel that it's only the Luos who create problems. So I think it would be only fair. And when people are going to swear in, you find Farah, Kalonzo, there are others, they disappear. It's all left to be an ODM issue and only my people. So let's not have this double sword that we talk very authoritatively here, but our people are not with us. I didn't see Somalians demonstrating when my people were being killed. So let's acknowledge that there's a problem. There's a problem. We need to bring the country together. There are injustices. There's exclusivity. There's exclusion that we must address. Thank you. Let's come together and have a national conversation.
All right. Allow us also to rope in our callers who are hanging on the line. We have Dan hanging on the line. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Debarl. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You have a question or a contribution for panelists?
I have a contribution. I want to say this, Debarl.
Yes, please.
That the country is wounded.
True.
And those in leadership are not helping in trying to solve the problems we have.
Yes.
What we've been doing as a country is actually to look for a blanket and try to cover that wound.
Yes.
Until we realize that we have a problem and try to tackle the really issues that are affecting this country, we may not go far.
Yes.
I remember when President Kenyatta and William Ruto came into power in 2013, they promised the Kenyans that they were to bring this country together. But looking at what is happening today, communities hate each other so much with a lot of vigor. This tells you that there is a problem. Look at the kind of comments that are being made by our leadership. They make comments according to what party they come from. This doesn't get to help the problems. We have to appreciate that there's a problem in this country. We have to look for a way of solving this problem if we have to move forward. But trying to hide and shy away from this problem, guns, whether arresting people is not going to sort anything. We have to face these problems as a country together and see how best this can be solved. This is not a problem of Raila. This is not a problem of Uhuru Kenyatta. This is a problem that we're facing as a country, and we have to tackle it as a country, and not anybody else.
Thank you, Dan. Right, we have Ibrahim. Just a moment. We have Ibrahim also hanging on the line. Good morning, Ibrahim.
Hello?
Yes, morning to you, Ibrahim. Habari yako?
Mzuri sana bwana.
Yes, uko na swali?
Niko na contribution kidogo. Ile kitu nilikuwa nataka kuzungumza.
Yes.
Mimi nakwambia hawa envoys si makosa yao. Makosa yako wapi? Hawa watu Jubilee ndio inawafuata ikiwaambia bana, sisi bana waambie hawa jamaa kama sisi ni serikali tutawapatia tenda fulani, tutawapatia nini, au ma European wakileta mambo mengine kule hao ndio wanawafuata wakiwaambia bana, kuwabembeleza, kuambia ndio wajulikane kama wako kwa serikali. Kwa hiyo sasa wanachukua advantage, washaona hawa watu ni wako hafifu sana, wanataka president na hao wenyewe wanasema sio ma president. Sasa wanatumia ile njia na watatumaliza. Kwa kwanza tujiulize kitu ya kwanza, sisi ambasada wetu katika Uingereza ama ambasada wetu katika Amerika anazungumzanga nini? Ushasikia anazungumza nini? Wanakaa kule kama masanamu. Alafu mkija kwa Njuki unakuwa double standard. Mara unasema watu wazungumze, mara unasema serikali iliapishwa. Hatuwezi kwenda mbele, let us move on. Kama ukiangalia Kiambu maskini umezidi na huko ndio Uhuru anatoka. Ukiangalia kule kuna maskuli yamefungwa Baringo. Sababu ya maji. Bado tu tunatia story jamaa.
Asante. Right, we have Dixon as well from Kericho. Good morning, Dixon.
Morning, Debarl.
Morning to you.
Debarl, I'll be straight to the point. One.
Yes, please.
After eight general election, President Uhuru told us very well that he's going to fix the judiciary.
Yes.
Rightly, that's what is being done. If a government officer cannot obey a court order, tell me, if an NTV has got a problem with anybody, how will it be sorted out? Because he might decide also to ignore the court order.
Yes.
That is an anarchy being done by the government, and the rest of the country will follow. Two, we have a new government after the disputed election. Why is it that only half or a quarter of the CS are being vetted? Why is it that then the president took an oath during the month of December? This is an open violation of the Constitution, because everything is new.
Thank you, Dixon. Right, let's take Paul lastly, who's hanging on the line. Of course, I'm given to understand also he's dropped that particular call. But response to what our viewers are asking this morning, right from Dan, Ibrahim, and now Dixon as well.
You see, I'm the one here.
You're the one?
Yes,
actually.
yes, they've already said.
You will begin with a chance to defend yourself. Thank you.
You see, Ochuodho says that we were not there to witness the swearing. A substantial part of NASA was saying, yes, we have grievances, yes, we have a problem, yes, we believe this election was stolen from us, but we are advocating for dialogue. And we disagreed with the presidential candidate. We came halfway. We are saying dialogue, until finally he himself is saying dialogue. Tell me one person from the other side who has the capacity even to say dialogue. Muthomi talks in one direction, and then he comes up with a caveat and comes up with many other conditions that essentially makes the first statement inapplicable completely, not applicable. Because you can't say dialogue and then you say provided A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and which you for sure you know that's not going to happen. So the point we are trying to tell you, Ochuodho, is not that we are getting tribal and saying it's not Uhuru Luos who gave alone who gave all the votes to that Raila keeps on getting, and many more that we feel is not announced and is stolen. It is the country itself. Well, of course, I know where your heart is, but that's not a problem. That's why we have a democracy. That's why we have a democracy. That's when we can see a Luo supporting Uhuru and Kikuyu supporting Raila. That is where the beauty of the democracy is. So I don't have any problems with you. But the point is that we have come, we have advocated for that. The ball is in the court of Jubilee now. Jubilee needs to make the move and say yes, the narrative. And we're even going further and saying that this dialogue does not have to become a dialogue between two people. We want institutional dialogue. We want a national dialogue in which a whole group of people, intellectuals, politicians, you know, the businessmen are involved with this dialogue, so that we don't have a problem or impunity, electoral impunity in the future. We don't have a situation in which always this country is divided down the middle. You see what I mean? Because of two people who, for all practical purposes, can privately be very good friends, but who enjoy the fact that the country can be divided, so that they can validate one another all the time.
Thank you. Right, Muthomi Njuki.
Thanks, Debarl. I would really appreciate if my friend Farah, Maalim, and Shem Ochuodho, who this particular morning have been keen on bringing in some tribal places. Do not Kikuyu-nize me or Luo-nize me. I am a Kenyan from somewhere around Mount Kenya region. And when I speak for my people. Debarl, I do not work to please men. I work to please God. And when Muthomi Njuki speaks, I speak what my people are saying. Because this issue of dialogue, and you can see now it's taking a different twist where Farah and some of his friends who are calling from out there, they were thinking that I am taking a twist where I am going to insist that Raila Odinga and Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta will sit down and discuss the elections and how to share power. I will not support that. When we say we have to have dialogue, it means we have to have a conversation, because when two people don't speak, first of all, we normally have a crack. Because even that issue of not being able to communicate by itself, it means that there's already serious mistrust, and for people who have leadership and there are people who are following them, they have quite a substantial following. And therefore, because we're in one Kenya, and forget about this issue of 41 and 42 and 1, it doesn't add up for us. For some of us who come from those small ones who are usually not counted. We want to be part of Kenya. It is not possible for us to say we want to have a conversation, then we do not know the content of conversation. Suppose they go there and they start talking about things that don't concern us as Kenyans. That is where we have to give a deadline. Yes, have a conversation, but we want to have a conversation that is going to make the shilling appreciate rather than depreciate. We want to have a conversation that is going to make the big four become a reality rather than go back to where we were of about 3 months of uncertainty where even investors took off. That is where we are, and that is what I speak for. And it doesn't matter what Farah Maalim thinks or the guy who called, I am still on dialogue, but not with the content of moving Kenya forward.
All right, thank you. Let's say from Shem Ochuodho, then we drill deeper to other conversations.
I think it's important we correct something that Farah said, but wrongly so, and repeatedly said. You know, first he's saying that Raila Odinga has not been talking about dialogue until they boycotted the swearing in. That's lie. He's saying, just take your time. He's saying that Jubilee has not been talking about dialogue. Nobody from Jubilee side has been talking about dialogue. That's another lie. I think the president and the deputy have said dialogue. Where there's a difference, and probably it's what Governor Njuki is repeating here. Dialogue about what? They're saying we are only prepared to talk about a particular thing, but not about other. So I think it's factually wrong when Farah says that they made the Prime Minister talk about the dialogue, because he's been talking about it even from the last time, after the October elections. The only thing I'm happy that has since changed. Previously, NASA and most of the leader was only talking about electoral injustice. I'm glad over time they have added 3 points, which are part of what Tushauriani has been talking about. Issues like strengthening devolution, issues like exclusion, addressing the issue of inclusivity, and so on. So to that extent, some issues of of the security sector and extrajudicial killings. I think to that extent, I fully agree with those 4 points that the NASA leadership is talking about. But in the same vein, even the economic emancipation is another important issue to be addressed. So for me, we seem to be saying the same thing, but we are going around.
Thank you.
Why doesn't each of us just bring the points they bring on the table? And finally, allow me to agree with the 3 callers. I fully associate with the points they are all making. Dan I would not have put it any better than the first caller. Ibrahim raised the issue, even in Kiambu, even in Gatundu, you will find some poor people. So this is a point we need to acknowledge. We don't need to be poor. So even in Baringo, there are poor people. So I think the point is, let's acknowledge as a country. And I think we are saying the same thing. I don't really know why we're going around. That yes, there's a problem. Can we come together and reason? The Bible also says, let's come together and reason as a people.
All right. Thank you very much. Maybe also, I think also to my attention is the fact that also you're not in agreement with Senator Kithure Kindiki on this issue of the cabinet appointments. Yeah. Yesterday's paper, I think Dr. we are saying that speaking. Just a moment. Speaking on Friday during a fundraiser in Chiakariga Girls High School in Tharaka, Nithi constituency, Senator Kithure Kindiki took issue with you, Governor Muthomi Njuki, Njuki's insinuation that Mr. Kenyatta denied them a cabinet secretary because of the blind loyalty. Maybe you can actually try and clarify on this as well. Since you're here,
I'm laughing because you are unable to totally get the name.
Oh yes,
Senator
Kithure
former leader of majority and deputy speaker in this country. You can't miss Kithure Kindiki.
It is a Joe Cracker. Yeah, the name.
Kithure Kindiki. First of all, I want to say that despite what has been created in the media on Sunday, that there's a crack between me and my Senator Kithure Kindiki, it cannot be far from the truth. We are very good friends, and we have a very cordial relationship in our work to build Tharaka Nithi County. It is okay for politicians to differ on opinions or political situations like the one we have at the moment. I am not on record, and I want to say it again here, that yes, I was dissatisfied, and I'm still am, on the way Tharaka Nithi County was treated in terms of appointments in the positions of the cabinet and also the PSCs because of the contribution we normally make to in the elections of in this country. And I am not saying that Tharaka Nithi County is the only one, but I speak for Tharaka Nithi County because I'm the governor of Tharaka Nithi County. If Kithure Kindiki, my senator, thinks otherwise, that is his personal opinion, and I cannot have to make him see it in the way I see it. And therefore, that should not be an issue of having cracks just because we all different opinions on the same. But however, it may be reporting because in that meeting I know what Kithure Kindiki said and what I said. He may say, let us wait. Probably the Mheshimiwa Kenyatta think about us. And I also said, even as we wait, let it be live to the fact that the leadership be live to the fact that we are now aware that we always want to know what is our stake before we blindly follow people and vote as a bloc and be called a stronghold. That is my position. I still remain the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
But Debarl, on this one, you know, once we had a minister called Ochuodho John from Migori. Remember, he was reported to have been sleeping ordinarily in parliament, but when he woke up, he would say, what about Migori? So Governor Njuki is very right to ask what about Tharaka Nithi. The same way I was asking what about South Nyanza, because they're clearly excluded in government. That did not take away from the fact that Ochuodho was a very loyal KANU minister and member. But I think what I would be concerned about was the vetting of the cabinet secretaries, if you allow, because I think this was important. I was very concerned first that NASA MPs stayed away. I think maybe Mheshimiwa Farah here as a senior leader of NASA, they better stop drawing public funds because they are being paid salaries, but they're not doing their work. They're stealing from Kenya's people. I think it's not right. They're taking salaries from Uhuru Kenyatta's government, the same government they're saying they don't recognize. I think for me, this is doublespeak. It's wrong. Anybody, I want to challenge those MPs with conscience. Stop taking salaries and say, I don't recognize this government, but then we know they're genuine.
But secondly, of course, they're riding on the premise that they don't recognize the, the presidency and the government of Uhuru Kenyatta.
But they're taking salaries from us, government. And also, even for the...
Or the fact that they were duly elected by the people.
Well, the same IBC that they complain, when we talk of electoral justice, there's so much to say here. Were they genuinely and legitimately elected? I think that's an issue that also needs to be talked about.
Thank you. Thank you. We need to gravitate to other things, but we have also tweets from our viewers as well. We have Tulwo. He's saying the country needs leadership now more than before. Kalonzo, despite the hate she faced the other day, is the voice of the desert. His decision not to divide the country more by not swearing himself in is commendable, he says. We have Zab I think I've lost Zab's comments. All right, let me just go to Wycliffe Sunday is saying, Wycliffe Sunday is saying, I suggest to invite one of us, common mwananchi. I can tell you for free that some of the views by your so-called experts or analysts categorically omit what a non-political Kenyan wants. Yeah, maybe we should consider also inviting. Yeah, and then we have Kennedy Omogi saying we are not discussing electoral justice. He's asking if we are not discussing electoral justice, what then is the dialogue on? That is what Kennedy Omogi is asking. Wangai, Kenyans do not know what the envoys did is like what neighbors community do when they find a couple fighting and threatening to kill each other. They make a decision about the problem to keep both alive. It doesn't matter if it's not fair. That's what Wangai is saying. Also, we have Kemi saying, kindly be honest, envoys also listen to all sides and work as arbitrators. So it's kind of telling where the loyalty is, because the reality is that that was a joke on democracy. And Kanye Gioko is saying, I crisscross this country very often. Which communities are worrying, he asks. I have been hosted cordially across Kenya. Hatred and divisions belong to the minority on social media and political enforcers, hang-ons, that is what Kanye Gioko is saying. And also Dr. Felix Kiptore says, in Kenya, everything revolves around politics. Jesus might come today, and some politicians might claim it is their effort that made Jesus come.
See, Debarl, sometimes the stuff we hear here from Ochuodho and others gets you the impression that it's a juvenile kind of analysis. Or we're supposed to analyze these things and be the intellectual you are. When you say that, talk about the economy, talk about these things, those are not the issues. The issues is a contested election. You cannot try and forget the main issue, and then you go on peripheral other things. Oh, he said this, he said that. No, the issues are the elections. The elections were contested 3 consecutive times in this country. People talk about secession. People are talking about having a parallel president. You don't want to look at the gravity of those, what you call, discussions, the narratives that are there, until maybe you one day wake up and see that this country is no longer the way you're used to. And nobody can use force over the other. The point is, when I tell you that we have worked very hard ourselves to try and seek that narrative of dialogue, so much so that even the top leadership in NASA is now convinced that dialogue should be given a chance. And then you say that, no, he was talking about it. When did Raila talk about dialogue before now? You remember initially we were saying the injustice itself must be addressed. Now we are saying, let's talk about it, and everything has got to be on the table. And what is the first thing that's going to be on the table? The contestation, the basis for the problem we have right now. The basis is not diaspora remittances. The basis is not the narratives on the economy. The basis is not, no. We have a saying in our language, we say that somebody had an arrow in his butt and another arrow in his eyes, and he was told which one should be removed first. And they say, remove the one in the butt first, let me sit down. Let me stabilize first, and then you can remove the one in the eye later. The point is that let us stabilize the country and unite the country first. Then we can talk about the other narratives.
So which is that arrow on the butt?
The arrow on the butt is the electoral impunity and injustices that has taken place in this country in the minds of a substantial part of the population here. Can I finish?
Oh, just a moment.
Can I finish?
Let him finish.
Can I finish? I don't care who's looking for a job. I know Muthomi Njuki is looking for it through the support that he gave, and he didn't go. And he's very honest about it. He's telling Uhuru, if you don't give us a cabinet secretary in this, we might take our vote somewhere else. We might even have the people's assembly.
He's already clarified that.
And he has clarified, and he's honest. Yeah. But here is Ochuodho jumping up and down and all over.
All right.
I think that's a bit unfair.
No, it's not unfair.
Well, I'll give you a chance.
To be fair to me, I think words like juvenile, you don't expect an intellectual to use those words. It's very unfortunate. You know, let's keep it civil. And by keeping it civil, it doesn't mean that everybody must see everything the same way you see. While there are those people who believe that electoral justice is Kenya's biggest problem, number one, And they're entitled to their opinion, and I respect it. But doesn't mean I have to agree with it. And if I think that the Kenya's premier problem is not that, mine too should be respected. Okay. For me, Kenya's problems are three. They are impunity, they are ukabila, they are corruption. These electoral injustices are only a consequence. And this is why we are saying let's have a conversation, but you please don't call people names because you don't agree with them.
All right,
so
thank you.
Let's just reason.
All right, let us hear from Muthomi Njuki.
Well, Debarl, you know, the system that we used to arrive to where we were is the system that are available, and ultimately is what we are supposed to respect, because they are systems derived from our constitution. We cannot keep talking about stolen election when we do not have facts beyond reasonable doubts from the system that we have to be able to support the same. And that is why we are saying the end justifies the means. At the moment, we are concerned about the barefooted woman in the village and the welfare, not really the struggle for power by the politicians up here and wanting to use her to climb to that power that we want. If we have tried it and we have failed, why don't we try another time? But for now, why do we want to bring in things that is going to make the environment unbearable for her, so that she is not able to do things that makes her be able to put food on the table? That is my biggest problem.
Thank you.
Why don't we just agree that if there's a dialogue that is geared towards bringing a conflict again,
yes,
then it should be avoided by all means, and only dialogue towards convergence rather than divergence.
All right.
And that is where we have to have parameters.
All right. As we're winding up, I'll be remiss if we don't really touch on what also we have as an editorial cartoon on page 10 of the People Daily today. And we have this has been, of course, the ongoing story, for instance, last week of Miguna Miguna, Republic of Kenya passport and Republic of, or Canada. I swear I'm still the general, he says. But the whole handling of Miguna Miguna to the public eye, it seems this it was not really fair, according to many pundits as well. Given the fact that you were born a Kenyan, you cannot revoke that particular, you know, right to be, you know, a Kenyan, as it was also put forward by so many pundits as well, that he revoked, which is not very clear as well. But just briefly, as we're winding up, from your own estimation, do you think this was actually a fair treatment that was given to, speaking as a Kenyan, leave alone him being a, you know, an activist or a politician as well? Let's begin with Farah Maalim, very briefly. Briefly.
I don't think due process was followed in that. And in any case, he is a citizen of this country by birth, by descent also. I mean, all his great-grandfathers and ancestors were here. And you can't take away, you can't strip the citizenship from such a person. Mm-hmm. So I think it was done crudely, primitively, again, and not in line with the law. And that's the same thing which is happening right now when court orders are not respected. Court orders are not respected. A government is a government because there's a systems in place. It's not a nation of men and women. It's supposed to be a nation of laws. And if we don't respect our own laws, then we'll end up respecting nothing in this country. So basically that's, and that is the consequence of those things, like the parallel things we're looking for right now. I mean, people are saying being sworn in as people's president. And if that progressively continues, we'll have a failed state, I can assure you.
So was this an outright disregard of the rule of law and running roughshod? What is really codified in the Constitution? Muthomi Njuki.
Debarl, there's an unspoken code of thinking on the traffic that is not written, but it's usually widely very used. That if you're driving a bus with 60 passengers, and there's one fellow on the highway who is staggering there, and you realize if you swerve, this bus is going to kill 60 people. You cross with that one, save the 60.
You crash according to
and you move on. You know, people are looking at the rights of...
You crash one?
Yeah, people are looking at the rights of Miguna Miguna. But you should look at the consequences of retaining Miguna Miguna here. What would have been happening right now if you tried him here?
But are you privy to what Martin Luther said? That injustice anywhere is a threat of injustice everywhere.
Yes.
So even one person there,
that is true.
Justice everywhere.
That is true. what I'm trying to imply in this particular case is that if Miguna was being tried here at the moment, we would have been having fracas in the streets every day of people going to Milimani. We would have been having an aggravated situation which can easily deteriorate to what we're calling civil disobedience. So why don't we deal with him when he's out there, as we deal with Kajwang when he's here also, kind of try to see whether we can diffuse the situation. Whether it's unlawful or not, it is which of the two is the lesser evil in the eyes of Kenyans. Because do we let the country...
Okay. But that is when now we'll have contention on the sanctity of the Constitution, right? Because if you look at this evil and this is the lesser evil, then we shouldn't be having a Constitution. And I think misquoted that. I said it is the threat of injustice anywhere, the threat of justice everywhere.
Debarl, I may not agree with what Miguna says. I rarely agree with what he says.
Thank you.
But I'll defend his right and to death to say it. I think that's what we need to recognize. In this particular matter, it's not right that you chase away a national. For me, the issue should be, was Miguna still a Kenyan national or not? I would want to call upon the Cabinet Secretary Interior, who says that Miguna irregularly acquired a passport, because that's what the issue is.
Yes.
The issue is not whether, because the troublemakers, we would say, okay, can we export all these other so-called troublemakers? I mean, you can't do that when they are citizens. In fact, I may say that the guy who is driving a bus, if he followed the Constitution well, he would be driving by the rules. He should be driving at a speed where he should brake to save the lives of the single person as well as the many, which could happen in this case. So in this particular matter of Miguna, and I think I would want to challenge the state. I want to believe there are many senior state officers who wrongly had dual citizenship, even when it was illegal. And I want to disabuse a point. Farah and Miguna have claimed that you cannot revoke a citizen's right by birth. The law, the Kenyan law, is such that until we were able as diaspora to get dual citizenship, if you were having a second nationality, it was illegal. And we knew there were senior people in government who did. It was illegal. And the current law says once you lose it, there is a due process to get it back in the Nationality and Citizenship Act. What we have issue with is that it's made cumbersome to regain it. But in this case, my challenge to the Cabinet Secretary, please give evidence to Kenyans that Miguna had revoked his citizenship.
Thank you very much.
But if not, then he needs to be brought back in.
All right, thank you. A lot to discuss on that. Of course, we shall continue with the politics of the day tomorrow on People and Politics. I want to thank my panelist, Farah Maalim, who is a former deputy leader of, or actually is the former deputy speaker of the National Assembly, that is the 10th Assembly, and the deputy leader of Wiper Party. I also want to thank Governor Muthomi Njuki from Tharaka Nithi, and Dr. Shem Ochuodho, also, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance, also for joining us this morning. Kabando failed us this morning. I think this is the last time I'm going to give him an extended invite to him. He's always been failing us. Thank you very much for your valid company as well. Let's see each other tomorrow on People and Politics. My name is Debarl Inea.